Hi everyone, and welcome to your weekly energy update, a general tarot guidance taking a look at how this week's energies are likely to play out in our lives, both individually and you probably expect me to say collectively, but perhaps not right now, not in this reading. We are in eclipse season, we have an upcoming eclipse this week, so let's just honor ourselves, let's just honor the individual and just forget about the world. Just forget about what is happening outside because without a shadow of doubt something is gonna happen, something very symbolic or significant. Just look back at the previous eclipses, June and May. Quite a lot has happened on the world stage, very impactful, significant events from so very many different points of view. Like, let me just give you a very small example that comes to my mind instantly: Afghanistan. And I think with that I said everything. That's so very Uranian, unexpected twist of events which changed everything in a second, crisis. And ultimately, we can all see how that kind of plays a big part in the longer term future for the whole world, basically. So that is what we can expect playing out on the world stage in eclipse season. And even though the theme is different because it takes place in Taurus this week and in December in Sagittarius, so that means that perhaps it's our value system, philosophies, religion, international relationships, the law, constitution, etc., that will basically receive the karmic nuance of these energies. But I do believe that individually, this time it's gonna be much more significant because regardless of how this plays out in our lives, it takes part in the sign of Taurus, and that's a fixed sign. So regardless of where Taurus falls into your personal chart, even if you maybe have no planets in there, it's still one area of life which is stable one way or another, which has been pretty much fixed in a way most of your life. And it also has something to do with your values, finances, perhaps self-worth, regardless of which aspect this takes on. It is still a game changer, so to speak, because it completes something, it finishes something, it brings perhaps something, a long-term work, and work not to be understood, as in a job or something like that, even though for some people that might be actually the theme. By work, we should understand our input in that area of life, regardless of how. And all of this has also quite a lot to do with the truth, with something very authentic, very honest, quite brutally so, with ourselves. This will be the moment that we're either, let's say, the karmic forces are gonna force us, and I'm so sorry to use this quite harsh term, but this is the power of an eclipse, to take a look at something in our lives which we might not have wanted to perceive so objectively, or it might just be a sudden realization, or whatever may occur around this time, it reflects something. It does reflect a big truth in your life, one way or another. And this is where in eclipse season, we don't really do that much inner work, shadow work, whatever. We just open ourselves up to receive the truth, reflect, contemplate, and process. And many times with eclipses, a part of that energy is where if we ask the divine or ourselves, or we contemplated about things like the mystery of life, meaning of life, big questions, answers are definitely coming our way at a lunar eclipse. So this is why it's so very important right now. And naturally, eclipses are very heavy energy, so even if they conjure up something truly wonderful and miraculous in your life, it might still leave you shocked a little bit. And actually with eclipses, when it's something very, very positive or constructive, very joyful, something truly good happens, and that reflects the truth, well, that also implies that maybe you were not seeing something about yourself or that area of your life from a very authentic, from a very objective point of view. Maybe you were way more pessimistic, maybe you underestimated yourself or something about you, or maybe, the past, and especially in Scorpio season, everything that we might have suffered throughout our lives might just have, taken away our power to see things, perceive things, even feel things differently. And an eclipse is like a reset. It just slaps us, shocks us, electrocutes us out of that state, giving us the chance, or forcing us almost, to look at a different side of life. In this case, way more positive, way more beautiful, or whatever, than we could have possibly imagined. And naturally, this can play out in the opposite way, where we might have been way too optimistic, way too positive, and this is like a modern trend where, we repeat positive affirmations and we try our hardest to dress everything up, in rosy colors, to hide perhaps the pain, to hide the not so easy to look at truth. And then it works like a charm. Of course, we transmute it. We project the positivity, the optimism, the deep faith. And it's absolutely fine. But then there comes an eclipse and it slaps us in a different way. And it tells us, okay, I appreciate your inner work. I appreciate your inner strength to turn this into positivity after all. But now just look at the truth and process it. Because dressing it up in something positive is not gonna work for the long term. So this is your moment when it's not positive, neither negative. Just face the truth, accept it, process it, if needed, suffer it out, and then begin anew. And then is the moment when you begin anew, when you can actually use those positive projections and affirmations and anything optimistic to genuinely build a solid foundation where whatever you're building is genuinely going to be positive, not just dressed up in positivity. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's still difficult. Either way, whatever the situation is, do not expect an easy energy, because it's not going to be easy. Even, as I said, even if it's something miraculously good that's happening in your life, it can still shock you, and it can still trigger you very, very deeply. As in, let's say you're single and been looking for tens of years for that special person, and under the influence of this eclipse you may meet that person, and instead of the miracle romance, maybe you might be experiencing a lot of guilt and doubt and shame and stuff like that. And all of those heavy feelings just pump to the surface. And before you can embrace the romance that you kind of dreamed of, first you have to look at yourself and answer all the questions why you feel that way. Why the guilt, why the shame, why the shock after all. And of course then you can embrace it fully. But this is just an example that it's not as easy, even if it's the most positive expression of this energy, and there is a lot of activity in the sky to make it positive actually. Uranus in the same sign where the eclipse takes place, Taurus, trines Venus, the lower benefic goddess of love and beauty, in an earthly sign of Capricorn. That's quite a lucky, fortunate, surprising energy that is added to the eclipse. Or just looking strict at the eclipse, the moon is trining Pluto. The power of faith, a massive emotional release, a massive emotional transformation, regeneration, healing. or a big cord cutting, which is a true blessing. But enough of the astrology. Let's take a look at what these cards have to say for this week. Now, I do want to say at least a couple of sentences, ideas of how this may play out collectively. I'm just not going to be focusing on that. Well, one of the core issues is going to be with work and work legislation. Perhaps the green certificate or green pass, how you call it, in many countries, maybe it will really impact and strike at the workforce. And there are going to be a lot of legal issues around that. And there might be a lot of protests, a lot of struggle, a lot of battle. And chances are that this week, whatever happens, it's going to leave all sides, so everyone involved in this, including centralized power, with a feeling of disappointment, as if no one and nothing is going anywhere. It's like stuck. And this will lead to pressure, tension, frustration, anger building up. So it's gonna be like a deadly silence, if that makes sense. Whatever else this energy may bring collectively, it will definitely, one way or another, and quite symbolically, trigger an old wound, if that makes sense, an ancient ancestral wound. Maybe something about discrimination, maybe something about the rich and the poor and the big differences, or maybe something about race or ethnicity or gender. There might be a big scandal out there, or something symbolic happens. Maybe a misuse of power that is interpreted as like a proper face on discrimination. And the positive side to this energy is something related to humanitarianism or charitable work. Someone will do something very influential, inspirational. Maybe it is something quite artistic in nature, so it might be an artist, a group of artists, or someone will definitely represent a powerful force of inspiration out there, so that is really good. Now let's take a look at what these cards have to say individually. First, we have the Strength reversed, clarified by the Ace of Cups and Six of Coins. Now this might represent that during this autumn season, even the end of summer, many of us have been in like a kind of survival mode, not the aggressive one where it's fight or flight, but rather a very creative one where we tried our hardest to keep everything in our lives balanced. We really try to live in the now, work with what we have, change what we can, surrender what we cannot, basically practicing the prayer of serenity, if this makes sense. But of course, that left us pretty much drained of power, of strength, of ambition, even determination over the course of time. And right now we may feel a little bit so very fed up, a little bit frustrated, where we feel like it is very important to keep up this work, because we know that we're nowhere yet. We're not really out of the woods yet, but at the same time it feels so very hard to put in even more effort into this. So we might be feeling a little bit, like wishy-washy. We want to be strong, but at the same time another part of us wants to be weak and just break down a little bit. Nothing dramatic or too bad or self-victimizing, but we're in Scorpio season after all, so emotions are running high, and something inside of us just demands that we are honest right now and do the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing is actually not being strong, choosing to be vulnerable and being okay with that. And this is just the psychological setup, if this makes sense, because the other two cards are extremely positive. They speak about a big surprise, and the surprise is gonna feel like pure honey, if that makes sense. So sweet, because it comes in a state when we're vulnerable, when we are not really fighting, when we are even having a small inner conflict. So whatever this surprise is, however it plays out for everyone individually, it's gonna, hit the spot. It's gonna really, really feel so comforting and soothing, because the Ace of Cups represents that it's gonna trigger powerful emotions of either satisfaction, gratitude, care, love, appreciation, and the Six of Coins represents that one way or another it will come from a person. Maybe it is us who will be the generous ones, as in doing something very nice for another person. But if that's the case, what we get in return is gonna wash us away in the best sense possible. But for other people, someone genuinely will want to be there. It might be an offer of friendship, a gesture which just comes as a saving grace. It's really, really gonna have a profound healing effect. And for others still, this can just be a massive professional, material, maybe even romantic breakthrough in a rather unexpected moment. And the unexpectedness comes from exactly what I said earlier. We are feeling a little bit tired. We had enough. We just want to break down a little bit. So for a lot of people, however this energy plays out, it's gonna feel like, divine intervention. Now, on the other hand, we have the Death reversed, clarified by the Ten of Cups, and the King of Chalices reversed. This adds a totally different layer to this energy, because this eclipse is gonna be profoundly healing and transformational for a lot of people, especially from an emotional perspective. This is where you release a lot of karma, a lot of pain, hurt, and suffering, and even if not immediately, but where this is guiding you is to have a proper new beginning, emotionally speaking. What is being released, healed, or basically purified, cleansed, or purged out, it can be for some people something related with their families, family of origin, something which might have to do with their parents, something that might have to do with the past, the history of their family. This might be a case of forgiving the unforgivable. This might be the case of just finally being able to understand one another, where maybe if your parents, especially a father figure, King of Chalices, hurt you in any way, shape, or form, or whatever happened when you were very, very young, maybe you come to the conclusion that would you be in the place of your father or your parents or your family members, maybe you couldn't have done any different yourself, and this leads you to profound forgiveness where you just accept, and nothing inside of you, not even your shadow, will hold anything against them anymore. This is like understanding, accepting, forgiving, and basically even admitting that you yourself would not have been able to do any better than them. What is, and that's it. While for other people, this is much more about a past relationship, maybe a past marriage, or just a very strong romantic, emotional, even karmic, especially karmic, connection, where as well you find forgiveness, especially if you're a female and your ex-husband, ex-partner, ex-boyfriend, one way or another let you down, disappointed, you couldn't take care of your emotional needs. Now you get to the stage where you can finally move on, you can finally understand, accept, and forgive. Maybe this doesn't mean that bridges are gonna be rebuilt or anything like that. It just means that it will no longer weigh on your soul. But, the eclipse, maybe this is not gonna be as healing immediately as you think, in the sense that perhaps you will come to this conclusion because something very not pleasant or very dramatic or a massive crisis might take place in the life of that person, and when you see them or even hear news that they're so vulnerable, defeated, broken, or something really bad happened to them, you might very quickly come to different feelings that, well, you know what, I actually want to forgive. And last but not least, for other people still, especially those of you who might have been stuck in an emotional stagnation for some time now, maybe even from 2018, 2017. And this emotional stagnation kind of means that you've done a lot of healing work, a lot of self-discovery, maybe a lot of shadow work, maybe went to a counselor, therapist, etc. So you've done a lot of work, and not that it didn't lead you anywhere, because it definitely did, but what you were missing all this time was that inner spark where you just didn't feel the thirst for life, the thirst to immerse in like emotions, into love, friendship, the joy of life. So even if your work had a lot of positive and life-changing results, this was still missing from the picture, the willingness to do something with your healed state, if that makes sense. To do something with your life, with yourself emotionally. Something not really spiritual of nature, something not very philosophical, but like real life kind of stuff, like just open up to friendships basically. That's the most minimal thing that you can do. Or basically not really shut yourself away from people who are not really like you. And this is what the eclipse is gonna trigger, like an instinct, almost like an inner unconscious function of auto-repair, regeneration, where that spark of life, the willingness to live it, experience it in a very down-to-earth way is gonna return. You will find yourself that you want this, that you dream of this, that you just feel so excited to embrace life. And, you know, of course, a lot of people might not have the conditions to do that immediately, as next week. But the desire, the genuine instinctual thirst for life is gonna matter a lot. Because very soon that is what you're gonna be doing. That is like the biggest attraction force in the universe. When you want and genuinely need something with every fiber of your instinct, so this is the instinctual self, usually you get it. And if you were wondering why not a lot of big miracles happened in your life, palpable ones of course, which should have resulted from your healing journey, this is why. You kind of missed this genuine instinctual magnetism to just draw it in your sphere of awareness. Now moving on, we have the Five of Cups clarified by the Three of Coins reversed and the Knight of Swords. Now this might be the not so favorable expression of the eclipse energy, because what this says to me is reenactment. You know, everyone, all of us have certain patterns, karmic patterns in our lives, deeply rooted into our unconscious, into the soul matrix basically, which usually play out the same way in our lives and they keep coming back. And always Scorpio season is the most ideal period for that, and also Pisces season. So something which kind of disappointed you all throughout your life, and to be understood as a theme, as a karmic pattern. Maybe something job related, maybe something which has to do with cooperation with other people, even if it's not very professional, like a friendship or a common dream, a common goal, some ideal or some, let's say, bigger purpose that you share with other people, like a best friend, family, brother, sister, sibling, even really, really good acquaintances. So something will recur that might make you feel, oh, not again. Why is this always happening? And, regardless of what that is, it reminds you of a big failure that you experienced in your life. For some people, it's professional failure. For other people, when you're so hyped up, you're almost there to achieve a goal, a dream, an ideal of yours. Perhaps you're not alone in this. Maybe you have like helpers, or maybe you're part of a team, even if it's not professional, like you and your best friend always wanted to accomplish this or that. Just an example. So that means that it's both you and your best friend or someone else. And you're so close to doing it, getting it, accomplishing it, and then something happens, like an inconvenience or, something that the eclipse might trigger, and you say, oh no, not again. Why is this always the case? Why can't we just achieve it one day? And why can't that one day be right now? Because we worked for this, or we manifested it, or we had a lot of input. We truly sacrificed for this. But there is a very big but here. That Knight of Swords tells you that yes, certain karmic patterns will just always come back in your life, but you always have power over them. You always have a choice to make. You're no longer the same person who suffered that defeat, who suffered that disappointment, who was profoundly disillusioned. And if you're part of a group, even if it's just best friend or family or whatever, the same goes for them. You guys are not the same people. You have a lot more wisdom. You have a lot more life experience. You know yourself more profoundly, and you understand karma and the karmic patterns in a totally different way than you have done 5 years ago maybe. So on one hand, this makes all the difference, because the sword energy is our perception, how our mind interprets reality. Our inner structures are a little bit different. We no longer fear disappointment, and at the same time, we have a different kind of relationship with disappointment. Now, we don't take it as a big offense or as a failure or as doom and gloom. And, we don't victimize ourselves, but we genuinely want to understand and learn from it and use it, integrate it somehow into our experience. And just because of this, it is definitely going to be different. I'm not saying that it won't feel at least a tiny bit as a disappointment, but you're going to turn it into something else. And on the other hand, making different choices, or better said, staying calm and not making the situation worse by, let's say, being pessimistic or just adding to the heaviness of it, can also be more than enough to turn the situation around. And by doing this, you just show the universe that you don't really need to learn a big lesson from this, because the lesson was already processed the previous times when this pattern, this disappointment, this failure was a big theme in your life. So right now, it can just be a very minor reminder that this might be one of your vulnerabilities, but look what you did with these. You transmuted them, you transformed them, you integrated them. So it can just be a false alarm, in the sense that whatever inconvenience or whatever may seem as a direct catalyst to the disappointment may very quickly just fade away, and it will no longer lead to the outcome you fear, but rather it may just lead to something very random, something that can also be surprising in a good way. And that goes not just for you, but whoever else is involved in this. And finally, we have the Queen of Coins, clarified by the Knight of Cups and the Justice. And this is quite heavy, but in the best way possible. Because what this says is balance and equilibrium, either emotionally or materially. And that balance and equilibrium, that might just be the end result, but how this, whatever may stir up in your life, how this will be perceived by you is like an act of divine justice. You will actually feel the profoundly karmic nuance of this energy. For some people, this will play out in the shape and form of a person. Maybe for some people, a new person that they will just meet around this time. For others, someone who is already a very important part of their lives. But something that this person does is going to be so very nurturing, loving, respectful, dignified, and benevolent that it's going to make you feel that life is not as hard as it actually is. For other people, this can basically play out as emotional healing and material healing, unfolding very rapidly, very, very quickly, simultaneously. So for some people, this will be the kind of case where the world outside, especially from a global perspective, is in fire, is burning, is in flames, doom and gloom. Yet, for them personally, every day is getting better and better and better. And this in itself is almost shocking, because this might come very unexpectedly. This might come just automatically almost, as in no real trigger, no real reason, just something inside of them is getting better, getting more prosperous, getting more fertile, if this makes sense. So for some people, the material part is money, income, something related to their work, while for others, it's physical healing. Maybe problems you had for quite some time, something physical like bones, joints, muscle, and for female listeners, perhaps something to do with hormones, or for some, maybe it's not even diagnosed, you've just been feeling so very tired, consumed, like big aches from time to time all over your body. Now, if this is the case, that is finally getting better. Life, it's in itself, in its integrity, is gonna start getting better and better and better. And last but not least, those of you who have anything to do with the law and justice, like a court case, administrative problems, or something where an authority, even if it's not like a court of justice, has to make a decision, and that decision will affect your life, especially your material situation, your home where you live, or your family, or if it's like a divorce or something, that's coming and it's favorable, and that will really, really be a massive sigh of relief for you. And finally, we have some divine guidance. We have the 7 of water and the 6 of air. And this divine guidance is a little bit tricky, because what it is telling us is that everything in life is ultimately an illusion. What exactly in the human sphere, in our human lives, in the way we build this world, our society, nations, and every single structure and every single face of it, everything really is an illusion, and that illusion is fueled by us, our needs, our perceptions, our wants, our consent. This is like a quantum principle. In order for something to be real for you personally, you have to consent to it. And this consent, many times it is hidden. We don't even know that we agreed. And this isn't going in the conspiracy direction at all. Let me just give you an example. Let's say the bank is a financial institution, right? But why? Because everyone thinks the same thing. Everyone agrees that it is. But if you, for any reason, would no longer consent, then you would get a different perspective, a different perception. that the bank is really a building with some people who are pretending to administer or work with money, which is also a make-believe value fueled by us. So if we hair split, everything is really a lie, an illusion that we agree to make real, all of us. And pretty much if we think about this, everything in our lives is the same. We consent that it is what it is. So that also means that perhaps we have a much greater control, word to say, and influence in everything in life and the world, including karmic patterns, including how our lives should be, what we should be doing with our lives. So basically what the universe, what the divine mind wants to suggest to us, and I do believe that this is a good advice for the Scorpio season, if you find yourself a little bit overwhelmed, confused, lost, if what you're going through is very, very hard and almost impossible to process, it defeats you, especially if it's something material in nature, change your very own terms and conditions, and all of this within your higher thinking. So your worldview, your world perception, your life philosophy, your faith. And once you change terms and conditions there, things are actually gonna be a little bit different. And the more you believe in your own power to change this, the more you will see this play out quite literally in your life. And one of the ways in which we can change terms and conditions is basically to focus on very, very deeply onto, even if it's like a fantasy, even if it's like daydreaming, whatever, meditation, but that's the higher end of this energy. Even sheer fantasizing is more than enough, as in to focus on something that would provoke a deep feeling of gratitude from within ourselves. So this isn't like being grateful for what you have in your life. This is more like owning everything that you have. It is what it is and it's okay. But projecting gratitude onto that which you genuinely feel that would make you live in this state. And naturally, focus on the emotion and the feeling much more than, just playing with scenarios in your mind. Like, for example, having 1 million whatever currency in my bank account. Well, that is the kind of fantasy which is not really susceptible to the kind of gratitude we're talking about. But focusing on how safe and protected it would make you feel and how much freedom it would give you to be yourself, that is what is truly susceptible to that kind of gratitude. And at the end of the day, all of us are living times and witnessing events, regardless if it's just collectively or personally, which are truly out of sci-fi or fantasy books. So if all of that is actually possible, then isn't anything really possible, especially if living in a state of gratitude was next to impossible way before this world change? Well, then for you personally, this is the impossible that has to happen, because everything that basically happens collectively in the world also happens in our lives as well. So if impossible is happening out there right now as we speak, then I do believe that we have every reason to be hopeful and faithful for, because we can definitely do it. How and when and all the details we don't know, but that's absolutely fine, because maybe for the first time in tens of years, life actually feels like an adventure, even if a scary adventure, but an adventure nonetheless. So thank you so much for listening. This concludes today's reading. I wish that the eclipse blesses everyone in the best and most miraculous of ways. Take good care of yourselves. Until next time, bye for now.